All right, guys. So 14.1 notes. This is everything that they talk about in 14.1. This is called the search for compromise, and we're inside of the chapter called Toward a Civil War. So everything that happens in this chapter, like we talked about, is leading up to a civil war, North versus South. So this lesson is them trying to not get to a civil war. They're trying to kind of shut it down before it happens when they look for a compromise. And, compromise is each side giving up a little of what they want to kind of meet in the middle, usually to avoid a war. So what are they arguing about? What are they going back and forth about? The biggest issue is going to be right here, slavery. Okay. Obviously, that's what North and South don't agree on. That's what they go back and forth on a lot. So, political conflict over slavery. As the United States added new states and gained territory in the 1800s, debates over slavery grew heated again. More states added, and they all would talk about a balance in Congress between free and slave states, so they have the right amount of votes. Of course, if it starts tipping one way, people get upset. Conflict over the spread of slavery led to a new political party, the Free Soil Party. All right, so now we have another political party. We've had Federalists, we've had Democratic Republicans, Free Soil Party, the Whigs, lots of different ones as we've progressed through the United States in the 1800s. So then they talk about the Compromise of 1850. This was put in place to try to ease conflict between pro-slavery and anti-slavery interests. It helped a little bit, not very much, obviously, because it didn't end up stopping anything. But then they come out with the Fugitive Slave Act. I kind of introduced this to you last week, but to go into a little bit more depth, it made it a criminal offense to assist enslaved people escaping North. Even if you were a person in the North, where it's free and slavery is illegal, you could not help an enslaved person from the South try to navigate around in the North or help them. If you were hiding them as a part of the Underground Railroad, you were still subject to being arrested as a part of the Fugitive Slave Act. So the Fugitive Slave Act actually made it a law where you could not help an enslaved person try to escape. So here's what the Compromise of 1850 kind of breaks down as. California was admitted as a free state. Okay. New territories would have no limits on slavery. The slave trade, but not slavery, was illegal in Washington, D.C. And the Fugitive Slave Act was created as a part of Compromise of 1850. So what happens here? They're trying to balance out the free and slave states. Okay, so California is added as a state to the United States, but it had to be a free state. Okay, but then these new territories, when we talk about like Kansas Territory, Nebraska Territory, things into the West that have not fully been made into states yet, they were allowed to have slaves. Okay, they weren't a state, so they didn't really have a vote, but they were allowed to have slaves. And then the slave trade, but not slavery, was illegal in Washington, D.C. So in our nation's capital, slaves were allowed, but they couldn't buy and sell them from other countries when they bring them in. Couldn't buy and sell them with each other, couldn't trade slaves with each other. So basically what slaves you had are all you would have. Okay. And that was hopefully they're trying to do is try to eliminate slavery in the future. But all of these slave owners would do is make the slaves that they had produce offspring where they would continue to have slaves. Okay. So then the Fugitive Slave Act, kind of a little bit more in depth on that. In 1850, the U.S. Congress passed a second Fugitive Slave Act. The first was passed in 1793. This act established strict penalties for anyone who helped an enslaved person escape. It also named special commissioners who had the power to return enslaved people to their owners. The act was in effect until 1864 when Congress finally abolished it. Okay, and you can see down here in the corner a poster that is saying basically like they lost a dog, but a slave ran away. They're offering a $150 reward. They ran away from the subscriber on the night of the second. Talks about, gives his name, 22 years old, 5 feet 6 or 8 inches tall. Kind of gives a description of who he is, where his last seen. Goes on and on. They're offering $150 reward, and this was in 1838. It looks like September 3rd, 1838. So that's just another example of what these slaves kind of meant to these people. $150 is not a cheap amount either in that time. Okay, so the Free Soil Party. We talked about. We kind of said there's a new party introduced. So they don't think they were as big as like the political parties we have now. They were a new party. Now we have Democrats and Republicans. You can find other minor political parties like what this one is, and I wouldn't even say this one would be as big as like libertarians like we have now. This is probably like an independent kind of party. Okay, so the Free Soil Party was a minor political party in the U.S. prior to the Civil War. The party opposed the extension of slavery into newly acquired Western territories of the U.S. The slogan of the Free Soil Party was free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men. The party's ideas were popular with small farmers, merchants, and mill workers, among others. The Republican Party, which also opposed slavery, absorbed the Free Soil Party in 1854. So, Free Soil Party just kind of became part of the Republican Party. They shared a lot of ideas, and that's how they went on to kind of be absorbed into them. So, Free Soil Party, a new political party, wasn't its own political party for very long, and kind of transitioned into the Republican Party in 1854. Okay, Kansas-Nebraska Act. This act allowed voters to decide whether to permit slavery in Kansas and Nebraska territories. Conflict in Kansas over slavery led to violence, and federal soldiers were sent to stop the bloodshed. So, Kansas-Nebraska Act, these are new territories, okay? No states are carved out of them yet. They're much bigger than the actual states that are there now of Kansas and Nebraska. And you can see that on the maps that you have in your book, just how big they are and how they were divided up at the time. And so conflict in Kansas, this, the violence in Kansas, that's what they call Bleeding Kansas. All right. I think, yes, this next one talks about Bleeding Kansas. So when they're talking about Bleeding Kansas, they're literally talking like bloodshed, lots of people died over the issue of slavery. The Kansas-Nebraska Act passed in 1854. Supporters of both sides crossed into Kansas to vote, altering the results. So, some supporters of slavery and supporters of no slavery both went into Kansas to try and vote for this to, make their side win, which would be illegal. Kansas became a pro-slavery state. More people voted to have slavery than didn't. Anti-slavery supporters created their own government. Both armed themselves and violence erupted. So, again, this is kind of like, I wouldn't call it the first battle of the Civil War, but this is kind of how the Civil War was, slavery versus anti-slavery, and they fought each other, okay? And I would say, this is not a huge place, so people probably knew who they were fighting against. you know, even in the Civil War, it was brothers fighting brothers, family fighting family. These guys could have been related. So they armed themselves with whatever they had, any muskets or rifles or guns, whatever they had, and started basically a little war. Okay, so Charles Sumner, he was a senator. He gained fame for an incident that took place in 1856. On May 19th and 20th, Sumner delivered a speech known as the Crime Against Kansas. In his speech, he criticized the Kansas-Nebraska Act and Senator Andrew Butler of South Carolina. The speech angered Representative Preston Brooks and Senator Butler's nephew. In response, Brooks confronted Sumner on the Senate floor and began hitting him in the head with his cane, severely injuring him. Sumner did not fully recover until 3 years later, but he returned to the state Senate and became an influential radical Republican during the Civil War and Reconstruction. Okay, so you see a picture, hitting him over the head with his cane. Things kind of got heated. All right, so that is all the notes. There will be a question on Google Classroom for you guys to answer over these notes, and that will be your assignment today. If you have any questions, let me know. I will be happy to answer them about anything you might have had questions about over this chapter or over this lesson. And then once you answer the question, go to work on, go ahead and read 14.2 for tomorrow.